What you've just stumbled upon is the first in a new mini-series that I'm going to be doing, based on two sentiments that I've heard expressed by the Legends of Runeterra community that I'm going to Frankenstein together into what you are watching now. The first one being a request for more historical content around Legends of Runeterra. The second one is the sentiment that the Gauntlet is too easy. We've seen Cephalopod and Ikato go on insane runs on stream, so I'm going to be combining historical content and the Gauntlet. Boom, mashed together we have this mini-series. Boulevard, are you going to be doing a history of the Gauntlet? No, that would be boring. Nobody wants to hear that. What I'm going to be doing instead is taking the winning lineups of previous seasonal champions and seeing if I can get a prime glory with them. I figured I might as well do this in chronological order, and that means I will be starting with the Monuments of Power seasonal champion Puyshpii from December of 2020. Now, there are three main issues I'm going to be running into through this series, both with Puyshpii's lineups and others, that really makes this a bit of a challenge. Number one, all of these lists are very outdated. I am playing with their unedited lists. No updates have been made exactly as they were. Number two, some of these decks have been nerfed in a non-insignificant capacity, and as such, some of the card choices no longer make as much sense. And number three, and perhaps the one that I am most scared of, is that some of these lists were made to counter a very specific meta that these players anticipated for the top 32 of that specific event, and that is even something that Puyshpii has run into with this second deck here, the Leona Aurelion Soul. But first, let's go over the decks that I will be playing today, as well as the differences from when Puyshpii played them to when I will be playing them now. Getting into the batting order, for the first list I'll be playing today, we have Puyshpii's Overwhelm, Darius Sejuani. Now, Darius is actually going to be a little bit better for me than he was for Puyshpii, as he is now a 6-6 on live that transforms into a 10-7 on level up, whereas Puyshpii had him as a 6-5 that turned into a 10-6. Where that health is gained, it is lost with Imperial Demolitionist, who Puyshpii got as a 2-3, and I will be stuck with as a 2-2, thanks to the World Walker expansion release. And then finally, a third card has actually been changed, Captain Farron. When Puyshpii summoned Captain Farron, he would get 3 copies of Decimate, and I will only be getting 2. Up next, we have Leona Aurelion Soul, which is the deck that I had in mind when I mentioned that these players had very specific metas in mind when they built these lists. These 3 Nopifies and 3 Denies, not going to be doing me as many favors as they did Puyshpii, whose meta at the time was Go Hard, Feel the Rush, Shen Fiora, Draven Ezreal, and Viheimer Targon. Obviously, the triple Nopify is in there for how good it is versus Go Hard, as well as Deny, and then Deny is also playing double duty because the high presence of Feel the Rush. So Puyshpii came in with the counterspells necessary to counter the top 2 decks, which were FTR and Go Hard, and that's just really not the case anymore. That said, a lot of these cards have been buffed for me. Level 2 Leona now has Overwhelm. Aurelion Soul is actually better than when Puyshpii played it because he had to play the nerfed version that had to have 25 power on board to level Aurelion Soul. I will only need 20 power to get that done. Solari Priestess, I will have as a 2-2, whereas Puyshpii only had a 1-2. I get an extra health on Ravoon. He is now a 5-6. Pale Cascade has actually been nerfed. Puyshpii got to this while it was still a +2/+1, so a little bit nerfed on my end. But Dragon's Clutch is buffed because when Puyshpii played this card, it didn't grant Overwhelm to all of your dragons. It only either drew 2 or gave them +1/+1. I imagine it's not going to come up, but I do want to shout that out there. Hush has actually been nerfed. Puyshpii played this as a 2-mana card, and it's one of the reasons that you saw it as a 3 of. And then, of course, Star Shaping has been nerfed for me as well, only gaining 4 health instead of 5. Overall, I'm worried about the triple Deny, triple Hush, triple Nopify, but I do think that I can pick up some wins here by just sort of curving out my opponent, maybe getting off an Aurelion Soul level up and playing for something like that. And I'm just hoping that I don't clog up too hard on these counterspells. And then finally, we have the list that I am probably the most worried about being my weak link on this run in Puyshpii's Go Hard. Now, the number of changes from then to now is not very significant, but the impact of them certainly is. For starters, Twisted Fate has been nerfed from draw 8 cards to level up to draw 9 cards to level up, and on top of that, Pick a Card has been nerfed from 3-mana draw 3 to 2-mana draw 2. So I will be leveling Twisted Fate a lot less reliably than people did in Puyshpii's era. Now, there are actually, I believe, no changed units. Petty Officer was already nerfed back down to a 3-1 when Puyshpii played this deck. The biggest nerf, of course, is going to be Pack Your Bags. Puyshpii got to play with that card at 1 mana. I will have it at 5. And a lot of the pressure from this deck was just that 1 mana Pack Your Bags constantly being a threat on your opponent's board state, and it's really just going to kind of fundamentally change how I have to play this deck. A compensation here is that Vengeance is 6 mana, whereas Puyshpii had to play with it at 7, but this was really a product of its time, and Keg Withering Whale was a really good avenue to success against a lot of decks, and that is just not really the case anymore. I'm very worried about Thralls and Sun Disc. You know, there's no Ruination in this list for me to even try to cheese that out, but I'm confident that we can still get there, and maybe people will even just ban this. So that's Puyshpii's lineup. Without further ado, here we go. So my first opponent is on Swain Sejuani, Azir Nasus, and Pantheon Udyr. Now, when I was looking over these decks, I didn't even really notice that the Sundisk was Nasus instead of Xerath, but amongst these, it still seems like the most real deck, and because my decks are a little bit on the slower side, in my opinion, I could definitely see myself struggling with Sundisk. And I go ahead and queue up the Leona Aurelion Sol first, because I've never played that deck before. Go Hard I at least played while Go Hard was a big deck. I keep the Nopify in my opening hand because it seems like it's good to counter the Zenith Blades and the stance swaps, and I end up with 3 Nopify in the opener. Now, the first piece of action here is really just a Solari Priestess coming down where I grab a Falling Comet because my opponent is on 2 champions that they want to pillar on, and I'm pretty light on action. I do feel like I kind of need to go for the Falling Comet here when they played Pantheon on 4. They haven't pumped any resources into it, but I didn't really want to float the 7 mana, and then on the next turn I'm able to kill Udyr with a Pale Cascade onto a Shield Bearer and just wipe out my opponent's board, try to make sure that they can't really play any of their stances. Next turn progresses, my opponent passes on turn 7, just offers me an open pass, but I don't want to take the bait. I feel like they're doing this because they have a pretty mediocre hand, and I really want to get down my Eclipse Dragon into Aurelion Sol on turn 8 and level it up. So what they do here is they post a bunch of stances into their Gift Giver, and I'm not too worried about it. I only need 1 Shield Bearer and the Eclipse Dragon to survive in order to level Aurelion Sol on the next turn. So rather than take 6 damage, I'll go ahead and sacrifice one of my units here, and then summon Aurelion Sol. And because I still have 3 mana for Nopify, I'm really not worried about my opponent doing anything too crazy, and I'm able to level up the Aurelion Sol with no issue. Now, I got Living Legends off of Aurelion Sol, and as you can see here, the first Living Legends really didn't offer me too much, so I go ahead and grab a second one off of a Star Shaping. I run out all of the cards that I need to on the first Living Legends, and the second one does give me what I need for lethal. It gives me the Scourge and Destroyer, and my opponent goes ahead and surrenders on the next turn when I'm able to attack with everything. So game 1 in the bag, we're off to a good start here, 1-0 with the Aurelion Sol Leona, which it went smoother than I expected it to. Now, Go Hard I thought I might have a little bit more of an issue with. I only have 2 Vengeance in the deck. I'm up against, again, a deck that is looking to really get these big beefy champions. So I decided that I could probably try to start off aggressively, but I know that they play some lower to the ground things, and leveling Twisted Fate seems like my most realistic avenue to victory, unless my opponent can get off 2 Ram stances to kill it, but instead they go for like a regen onto the Pantheon. They actually end up not attacking with the Udyr here, which I thought was a little bit weird, and just offering a pass. And as much as I want to play a pick a card or a salvage, I decided that taking the pass and not taking the damage is probably worth it, because I probably will be taking at least 1 big Pantheon hit this game. So I kick things off on the next turn with a pick a card, as the Petty Officer probably not going to end up getting played this game. I don't want to put a keg down for them to just run over with the Pantheon, and I have to take a lot of damage. And instead, what I set up for here is Twisted Fate is now at 6 out of 9. Because I played pick a card, he will level at the start of the next turn before I have to play any cards. One of the problems that Go Hard could run into was actually getting through Twisted Fate cards at fast speed. So I am pretty cognizant of hanging on to a number of fast speed spells like the Withering Wail, the Salvage, the Glimpse Beyond, and trying to maintain mana for that a little bit down the line. I end up redrawing a Petty Officer, going for a keg here. And then this turn is just me trying to kill this Udyr, and it really not working out. My opponent has a couple of different answers at every turn. I'm pretty fortunate that I felt like I was able to actually utilize all of my fleeting cards in a pretty impactful way. As you see here, they're going to go for the Udyr Champion spell. Gold card, Withering Wail, they end up saving it with a Sunblessed Vigor. And then on the next turn, they level up Pantheon with a Troll Chant, and I feel pretty fortunate that it didn't end up rolling Lifesteal. That might have been a little bit of an issue. But what I'm doing here is I'm just playing out a bunch of cards, trying to get to the gold card, because I know red card will clear out the spell shield. So I use Go Hard on a Blinded Mystic to finish it off with the red card, pop the spell shield, and then I just have to play Doom Beast over my Silenced Keg in order to get the gold card onto Pantheon, be able to push through a lot of damage here, and try to finish my opponent off with the Doom Beasts or a Pack Your Bags off the top, something along those lines. And I think I get them down to 6 here, so just outside of the range of Pack Your Bags. But again, I do have a level Twisted Fate on field, so a red card plus pack will do it. My opponent levels Udyr at the start of the next round, but it didn't really matter because I drew Pack Your Bags. Go ahead and throw that one out there, set them down to 1. Now, they do play Guiding Touch. I was aware of that from a previous game as well as this one, so I didn't want to throw something on the stack. I figured I could play it a little bit slower. And then drawing Vengeance here was really fortunate because it's going to fork my opponent on their 4 mana, where either I win the game off the red card or I kill your Pantheon, which is as good as winning the game, and they didn't have an answer, so the red card does pick that up, and a lot easier than I really anticipated it. We're already off to a 1-0 start here in the Gauntlet, picking up a 2-0 victory in round number 1. So I decided to run back the same strategy as round number 1, which is just ban my opponent's most real-looking deck. In this case, I figured it was going to be Draven Scion. The Puffcap deck might prove a little bit of an issue again. I think my decks are looking to win more in the late game, and I am a little bit worried that I'm just going to get run away on by like a Puffcap Peddler or something, because 3 health units are not a easy thing for Go Hard or my Leona deck to deal with, but I don't have to worry about that for game number 1. They are on Aurelia Misfortune, which is just a worse Azir Aurelia, and I decide that my opponent probably doesn't play very well on defense, so I slam down a Solari Soldier on turn number 1 and just decide to push 3 damage into my opponent's Nexus. They're not going to have anything to say about that. Fast forward a little bit, you know, they throw out a Blade Dance, I block it with the Soldier, I trade the Soldier for the Blade Dancer, my Mountain Goat gets down, and they're just going to end the turn by playing an Aurelia, which, you know, not in love with seeing their champions, but I think this is better for me than Misfortune. They take an attack with it, I just want to get down the Leona so that I have a thicker body on field. I'm not opposed to throwing both of my units in front of these blades. If they want to use a Twin Discipline to kill my goat, so be it. Next turn I play Ravoon, they Defiant Dance it, not in love with that, but I do end up just pushing damage here. After I block this blade, I think I gem up the goat and then just send my board at my opponent. If they want to trade Aurelia for one of my champions, that's fine by me. They Defiant Dance again. I'm just going to take a full block here. Not really too worried about the Leona dying. Sorry, I don't full block. I take one of the blades. I'm a little worried about the Leona dying. Don't want to have to use a Hush on that. I want to be able to Hush this Aurelia a little bit later down the line. And then my opponent just Defiant Dances my Aurelia. I've already got a Shield Bearer in play, so I'm totally fine to take that blade out. I'm just going to end up replaying the Leona here because my opponent only has 3 mana. Leona has 6 health. A Twin Discipline isn't going to get Aurelia into the range of killing me. Next turn, I replay the Ravoon. Their hand is pretty unit light. They haven't really played any units this game, so I just continue to run out a line of Solari units in order to stun out the board. They go for a Crackshot Corsair, but I pulled a Heavens Aligned off of the Ravoon, which is going to let me stun out their entire board and just swing for lethal. So, a 1-0 start here again. Feeling pretty good about that. And then game 2, we're going to just keep Go Hard against our opponent because they are playing Puffcaps. And if we can Go Hard a Teemo turn 1, I think that's something that we're just going to be really, really happy with. Yeah. Yeah! Yeah! I live for moments like that. So as you can see here, things get a little bit far away from my opponent pretty quickly. I'm able to just go really wide around them. There's no sweepers in Bandle City PNZ. You know, maybe a Static Shock or something will come out. I end up drawing a fleeting Glimpse Beyond off of my Pool Shark. I'm just going to use that to save a unit. My Elise crashes into the Caitlyn, which is what I wanted because I want to be able to finish it off with a red card because the flash bombs really do a number on my board. The health of my units are not particularly strong. My opponent Insider Knowledges in response. Because their Caitlyn was at 2 out of 5 flash bombs, I think they were really hoping for me to draw 3 of them and level the Caitlyn to protect her from the red card, as I did have about 8 flash bombs in the deck. They really got up there in numbers very quickly, but I'm really just looking to continue to go wide on board. I figured my opponent didn't have a punish for a development, so I didn't have to open attack, but instead they play a Karina, which is going to do a number on my board, so I'm going to Petty Officer into a Keg, Go Hard to finish off the Puffcap Peddler, and then full swing here. I think I maybe should have attacked with the Twisted Fate. I'm really not playing for a Twisted Fate level because my opponent has so many flash bombs in the deck. Even if I wanted to try and draw a bunch of cards, it's possible that the Twisted Fate would just end up dying. I end up going for a Keg here to try to get them to pull it instead of attacking with all of their units. It works out. I play a Withering Wail, and now I'm just kind of hoping to draw pack or push through a little bit of unit damage here, and instead a lot of my board gets wiped, but I know that if I can sneak 1 unit through, then I can finish my opponent off with the 2 Doom Beasts, and I didn't think they were going to full block, and if they did full block, then I would actually be fine with that. I would get a lot of their impactful units off the board, and I could start to rebuild my economy from there. I still had a Twisted Fate in hand, that's what the pick a card is, but instead they go for a Foundry, and that is going to give me the opportunity to play Go Hard, followed by 2 copies of Doom Beast, and just like that, bing, bang, boom, we are already halfway to a Prime Glory as we're able to pick it up here against this Aurelia Misfortune and Puffcaps. It's been smooth sailing so far, but now my opponent's decks are starting to look a little bit more real, and I decide that Viego is the most real amongst them and ban that one. I'm not sure what flavor of Twisted Fate Gangplank this is. I think it might even be Pirate aggro, but I actually get my Go Hard banned this time around, and I'm going to start things off here with the Leona Aurelion Soul. Again, it didn't get banned, so let's start with it. If they play Annie, I actually get to... Yeah! 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 I love shutting down turn 1 plays. This is probably my worst played game of the entire run. I go for Solari Priestess. I take Traveler instead of Meteor Shower. I feel like I don't need to Meteor Shower to kill my opponent's champions. I think I'll find another way to do it, even though I don't really have one. And then when they develop both champions, I start to realize that I probably should have taken that Meteor Shower. The Traveler is just going to be a little bit more awkward to play than I kind of thought it was from the position that I was in. I go for the Warrior with double Notify on backup, which is why I floated turn 5, and instead I just get hit with an Arachnoid Sentry. And I decide that it's probably not worth it to deny this. They almost certainly have a couple of spells that they can throw out that will kill the Warrior anyway. And here they do go for a Disintegrate. I still have the double Notify. I'm ready to stop whatever they play after the Disintegrate, which does end up being Static Shock, which works out pretty well that I have the Deny as well. So I'm going to be able to stop both of my units from dying here. But of course the damage is done. The Annie is leveled. Ezreal is still seeing these targets happen. And overall, it's a bit of a rough sort. Here, I actually end up blocking the Annie because I was just unaware that level 2 Annie stunned the unit. I thought I was taking a block onto the Annie. Instead, obviously, should have hushed the Ezreal and blocked that, but I was unaware of how it worked. Here, I use a Guiding Touch to stop a Mystic Shot, and then once the Mystic Shot resolves, I use a gem to try to protect it from another Mystic Shot, which they do end up going for another Mystic Shot with Disintegrate. I Notify, they Disintegrate again, I Notify again, and then they have another Static Shock to finish that off, and I just take a Surrender there. I've just played that one pretty poorly. My opponent has a leveled Ezreal and a leveled Annie. I'm down to like 6 health. It's just not happening. So now we get to figure out what this Gangplank Twisted Fate deck is, and it's not Pirate Aggro. It looks to be some kind of TF Conservatory deck. Luckily, they find all of their Fortune Croakers before they find a Twisted Fate, so a lot of draw power already gone from the deck. And I'm just kind of playing out my units and pushing damage where I can. I go for another open attack a couple of turns later. They play the Eye of Nagakoboros, so I don't get to push as much damage as I would like, but I'm just kind of trying to keep up on board. I have this Aurelion Soul. My opponent hasn't done too much thus far into the game. You know, I'll go ahead and play out a Ravoon because that's probably a little bit difficult for them to deal with. And they follow it up with a Twisted Fate's red card. I don't have any Keg interaction, so I'm just going to lose a couple of my units there. And I want to stay pretty healthy on board, so I'm going to throw down my Shield Bearer and then Notify a Scorched Earth. Next turn, they go for another Scorched Earth. I Notify, they have yet another Scorched Earth, and their Twisted Fate is sort of just left standing. I end up playing Ravoon without a Daybreak effect because I just want to keep a body around, and they have different plans as they go for Disintegrate and Blade's Edge. And now I feel like I need to Falling Comet the Phoenix. I don't even remember its name off the top of my head. Tibulk. So I obliterate the Tibulk instead of the Twisted Fate like I wanted to, but ultimately I get down the Aurelion Soul, so I'm feeling pretty okay. I know that they're already out of Scorched Earth because they threw all 3 of them at the same Ravoon, so I'm free to just attack with this Aurelion Soul. They end up blocking with the Twisted Fate, which is going to feel really good. And then they play a Gangplank, and they had a priority sequence to play a unit other than Twisted Fate and block with that instead, and they didn't. They sacrificed their Twisted Fate, which I think was at like 6 out of 9 or something. Then they play Gangplank. Then they play Gangplank's Parlay to hit my Nexus. Then they play another Gangplank's Parlay to pop my Spell Shield, which tells me that they had at least 2 Gangplank in hand the previous turn. I feel like they probably could have played the Gangplank as the blocker for the Aurelion Soul and just chose not to. They're going to flock my A Soul. They're going to play another Tibulk. I play Eclipse Dragon here, get a couple of units. I go for their blocks here. Not worried about hushing to stop the overwhelm damage. I think 7 is a pretty healthy life total. I'm going to assume that this deck isn't really playing Decimate. And then I get down Great Beyond because I miscount. I thought it was going to be at 11 attack and I could Zenith Blade it and just push lethal that way. But it wasn't quite the case. Instead, I knock my opponent down to 2. On the following turn, they go for a Twisted Fate's blue card. They don't have a lot of cards in hand. I still have like 2 Hush and a Deny. I decided to just kind of go wide here, and I'm not worried about really losing my entire board because I have the Immortal Fire plus Deny that I can play on their turn. And the Deny is really just there in case they play a stun. They have an Arachnoid Sentry or something like that. And of course, they do still have this Great Beyond that they need to get through. So I'm just going to kind of play out my hand here. Wounded White Flame, Mountain Goat, go as wide as possible. Then start off the next turn with the Immortal Fire with the Deny on backup in case they go for the stun. But that doesn't happen. They just end up surrendering. And that means that we're going to a game number 3. We are still in this. You can Prime Glory after taking a loss. You know, you kind of bounce back on stuff like that. But now I have to play my Overwhelm deck for the first time. And while I'm doing this, I'm still running commentary because I might put up the full VODs later. And I'm talking about how this is kind of a weird deck for me because it's not really an aggro deck in the traditional sense in that, like, I don't have a lot of over-the-top burn. I'm not playing Decimate. I do play 2 copies of Captain Farron, but I'm not really trying to rely on that. So I'm really not an aggro player. I'm trying to figure out how to navigate this. I get hit with a big Make It Rain here, not loving my situation, but I'm like, okay, I need to push damage. Let's throw this Iron Ballista into this 2-2, push a little bit of damage. I don't love that I'm down here, but My opponent's only got 4 cards in hand. I'm not expecting them to do anything too crazy, so I'm feeling okay. I'm going to go for the Grenadier plus the Demolitionist, try to tick up my Sejuani just in case that is an avenue to victory that I need to play toward a little bit later on. So I am going to just damage my own unit. I think they end up not attacking with the Fortune Croaker even, so I go in next turn, they take a block, and I actually draw a Wolf Rider, so I'm going to be able to ramp with that just a little bit. Nothing too impactful. I'm really just kind of looking to stay alive here, maybe draw one of my champions. It's kind of out of my control. I'm just kind of playing for the cards that I have. I take a pass here because I thought that they could block and I could Wolf Rider again, but they ended up not attacking, which is fine by me. I'm going to throw down a Yeti here, and that's going to let me gobble up the keg unless they throw something out here, but they don't. So I get to pull the keg, which pretty importantly to me is going to put them at 9, and this is a deck that runs 3 copies of Darius, so now my opponent is in Darius range, which I'm going to feel pretty good about. They end up using a Scorched Earth on my Legion Grenadier, which I think is really just them trying to get closer to these Ravenbloom countdowns, so I go for a Wolf Rider. The ramp on it doesn't really matter. I think I was already at 9 mana, but I am going to Elixir of Iron to protect from this Ravenous Flock, because I'd like to just make them commit more resources into my units, and then I go for a Death's Hand to finish off the 3-2, push a little bit more damage, and hopefully set up lethal on the next turn with the Death's Hand, and I do draw Decisive Maneuver, so when they go for all of these blocks, the Scorched Earth onto my unit, I know that this Decisive Maneuver should probably get lethal here, unless their hand is exactly Disintegrate plus a burn spell, but I'll deal with that if it happens. It does not happen, and we actually get to move on to a 3-0 start here. One more game to go, and we're gonna claim that Prime Glory. Alright, this is it. This is for the Prime Glory. So much to my dismay, my opponent's decks are looking very real here in the last round. I decide that Poppy, Jarvan, Bard is probably something I'm going to deal with the absolute worst, so I am going to have to play against Annie, Jhin, plus Heimerdinger, Jace, mulligan my entire hand here in game number 1, and I'm feeling pretty okay. You know, I've got a couple of shield bearers and stuff, just some Solari units that I can go ahead and block with, but then something that I was really worried about happening when I was going over the decks happens, which is I draw 2 Hush, a Nopify, and a Deny, which means that here on turn number 4, I actually just have no plays. So I can't develop any more units. My opponent plays a Jhin, and I'm kind of in a worst case scenario here where just so much of my hand is unplayable. And then they go ahead and throw down this Sunhawk, and things are just really getting bad for me really quickly. I throw down Ravoon. They go for all of these attacks, and so many things go onto the stack. They're going to block another unit, or stun another unit, rather. I go for the Nopify onto the Noxian Fervor, but now I'm not going to be able to kill Jhin because a second Lotus Trap is coming out, and just so many things are happening that I can't do anything about, despite all of the counter spells in my hand. The Hush is really not doing anything here. I play out a second Ravoon because the only thing I was going to be able to do was play 1 unit, so it's either Mountain, go to Ravoon. Might as well go for the Ravoon. And then I don't attack because my opponent has a Tibble in hand in 6 mana. Any units that I attack are just going to block, push damage onto me, and then they're going to replace them with Tibble. Now here I Hush Jhin because I thought it would stop Lotus Trap. I don't think it's really that impactful to how the game ended up playing out, but I was rather confused when the Lotus Trap still went off despite Jhin being silenced. I don't know if this was because they had a Jhin in hand or if it was in fact that Jhin doing it. I think it was that Jhin doing it. I think it's just tied to the Origin ability and is not something that you can actually stop with a Hush, but that is a pretty quick game loss for me. And then we take Go Hard into this Jace Heimerdinger deck where we're starting off, you know, trying to figure out what our win condition is going to be here. I feel like going wide and packing bags is probably our best bet, but our hand's not looking super great for it. We're able to push a little bit of damage early on. You know, leveling Twisted Fate doesn't feel like a realistic path to victory here, and I'm kind of trying to figure out how I'm going to be able to sneak this one back. We only get 1 shot at the Prime Glory. We're already down a game. If we lose here, it's all over. Our opponent goes for a Jace. We go for a Zap Sprayfin. Only targets in the deck are Go Hard and Glimpsbeyond, so we get a Go Hard. And we're going to clear out the Spiderling so that we can push through just a little bit more damage on the following turn. We get 5 to stick into the Nexus, have our opponent down to 14, and we're starting to, you know, feel a little okay until Heimerdinger comes down. Push a little bit of damage onto Zap just because pretty much everything in their deck that deals 1 damage deals more than 1 damage. Forge of Tomorrow comes out. They still haven't done anything with this Heimerdinger, and then when we throw out a Vengeance, they go for a Glimpsbeyond. So it's really a low impact Heimerdinger. Feeling pretty good about the way everything's playing out so far. We end up losing a bit of our board to a Withering Wail on our next attack turn. See what salvage can find us, trying to find that Pack Your Bags, and instead we find another salvage and a whale. Nothing really feeling good here, so we're going to make a keg so that we can whale the Jace, which does end up happening at the start of the next round. They go for the Shock Blast. They go for a second Jace. I decided to Vengeance this right away because it seems like they're really starting to run low on threats, You know, they've already played 2 Jace and a Heimerdinger. Next turn, I get down Ladros, and they play another Heimerdinger, so not feeling great about my Vengeance choice now. And they do level the Heimerdinger as well as get down 2 7/1s, and then immediately take them out of the go hard range. So not feeling too great, but my opponent is pretty low. I have a Commander Ladros. I'm pretty close to pack your bags. So I end up going for a Doom Beast to get a little bit healthy. I decide that I want to go wide on board here, and they actually give me something to go hard as well, which feels good. And now I am at the point where my go hards are pack your bags. If I can get one pack off, I should be able to end the game here with some unit damage, or at the very worst, you know, Ladros will be able to finish off my opponent at 1 health. So I go in here, knock them down to 4, and then they play the Albus Pharaohs. So they've got their 3rd Jace. They've already played, or rather seen, 5 of their champions. I salvage to mill 2 pack your bags, which is the opposite of what I wanted to be doing. And on the next turn, my opponent graciously draws me a card with Aloof Traveler, but I lose my Commander Ladros. Salvage mills another pack your bags, but I do find pack, and I decide not to fire it off here. I wait until they play the Jace because I was a little bit worried that, you know, I'd go for it and they would have some kind of heal spell and then they'd still be able to play Jace. I just didn't feel like I needed to play it at that exact moment, so I sandbag it for an action or so. But the pack does actually end up picking it up. Big clutch on the Ladros there to push a lot of damage into my opponent. And now we are going into game number 3. This is the last game of this run, and we're just starting things off slow. Both of us kind of playing cards that are going to scale into the late game. They've got 2 Pharaoh's Financiers in the bag. I invoked a unit. I go for a pretty impactful Meteor Shower here that I picked up onto the Heimerdinger, and to my surprise, no response comes out when I go to kill this Heimer. They just let it happen. No Flash of Brilliance, no Mystic Shot, no Vile Feast, no nothing. So I decide to run out a Mountain Goat, and then I go for the attack on the following turn. I lose one of them to a Mystic Shot that was already in hand, so they just actively chose not to play anything with the Heimerdinger, and I decide to go for the Dragon's Clutch here. I want to set up for that Eclipse Dragon on 7 into the Aurelion Soul on 8. It seems to be a pretty good, successful route to victory, and I know that these units are large enough that they're not going to deal with it particularly well, and this Shock Blast really just reads as a sign of desperation to me. I get the Solari Soldier on field because I want to be able to progress towards the Aurelion Soul level up, and I want to hang on to Nopify as well. My opponent goes pretty wide here with a Production Surge, but I'm still able to get down the Eclipse Dragon. They decide not to attack, and then I get to play out my Aurelion Soul. My opponent only has 8 mana. I have Nopify mana. The only way they could deal with this Aurelion Soul is a 2-mana spell and a Vengeance, which they do use, and then I'm able to Nopify the Mystic Shot so that the Vengeance clears the spell shield. And I'm able to attack with both units here because I need 1 Fury proc to level Aurelion Soul, but if I don't attack with both dragons, then they are not actually presenting lethal. They could just let it go, and then I'm not leveling a soul, and I'm not pushing lethal. So I go in with both of my units here. 7 health seems plenty to me to make sure that these units are going to survive. Aurelion Soul levels. I'm not really expecting him to die on first action. It'd have to be another Vengeance or a Thermogenic Beam. There's usually not Ruination in these lists, and then they go for a Shock Blast, which tells me that I'm free to run out my Scourge and my Great Beyond, and my opponent actually does end up going for a Surrender on the Scourge, and we did it. We managed to get the Prime Glory with Puyshpii's Monuments of Power seasonal winning lineup. Despite the list being a little bit outdated, we did it. We got the Prime Glory. So a couple of takeaways. Number one, I thought that was going to be harder, regardless of player skill. I thought I was going to see more real decks that could just kind of stomp me and run away with the game, like Thralls, Winding Light PNZ, stuff like that. Number two, I'm still playing with the formatting on this. This was the first time I did this. So if you thought the video was a little bit too choppy or hard to follow, please let me know, because I have other avenues. I'm trying to get each set down to 5 minutes and then talk over it. And I can either do that by chopping it together like I did, which I felt like might have been a little hard to follow, or I can just play the games at like 400 or 500% speed and then do it over that. So let me know if you thought it was hard to follow. Any feedback would be great on that, because I can play with the formula a little bit and try to clean it up for next time when I do Majin Bey's Cosmic Creation seasonal winning lineup next week after the patch drops, because I'm looking to get one of these out a week for the next foreseeable future as I kind of ramp up my content, since I'm no longer with Giant Slayer for the time being, so I still want to put out content, so I'm going to be doing it on my own channel. But I also, one thing I wanted to kind of get a feeler on is, obviously I don't want these videos to be 45 minutes or like 2 hours long, but I am open to making a second channel and just uploading the raw VOD of the run. I think it was about 1 hour and 20 minutes. So if that is something you are interested in, let me know. If there are like 10 or 15 people that want to see that, I will make a second YouTube channel and upload the full VOD of the run. If you just want to go through that, because I did talk my way through the game, so I have in-game commentary, and then I just muted that to do sort of post-game commentary for this video. So if you are interested in the raw footage, I can absolutely upload that to YouTube. It won't be on this channel, though. It'll be on a different one. It'll probably be like Boulevard VODs or something like that. I'll have a link for it if that ends up happening. Pin the comment or something like that. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at casterboulevard. And thank you for any feedback. This was a lot of fun to do. I'm looking forward to doing more of these. And yeah, just until next time. Next weekend, I will be doing the Cosmic Creation Seasonal Champion run and then posting it, you know, like the 4th of July week. So yeah, thanks for watching.